So I think title and MVP are a good place to start, just because it's like, hey, if you don't if you don't remember anything, or you're just trying to be like, what's going on? Like, it's just, this is, I think these are the first two markets to start with, just because there's a team that's really likely to win the title. It's the same team that won last year, and there's a player that's really likely to win the most valuable player. She has won the award twice already, and you can argue she maybe should have won last year, and she didn't. Brianna Stewart ended up winning instead. Asia Wilson, player we're talking about, and Alyssa Thomas both were very close, but did not win the award. So Asia Wilson's like even money ish to win MVP. Ace is similarly priced about even money to win the title. The thing about the WNBA just historically seems to be that consensus, we do a pretty good job of figuring out who the best team is even before the, like, there are not a lot of mysteries. We have had a couple crazy title winners. You're gonna, in any sport, you're gonna have your St. Louis Blues or your Kemba Yukon or your '04 Pistons. It's gonna happen sometimes. Like, in sports, that's what makes it fun too. But for the most part, the teams we identify before the year, who are your best 2 or 3 players? What teams do they play on? Those are your teams. And it rarely ends up being crazy different than that. There were a couple seasons that have acted like that, but look, like, I think people feel like kind of got this figured out again, that it's probably going to be the Aces. Maybe they play the Liberty in the final. I agree. I think that's very likely your top two in the regular season. They are projected to win the 2 most games by far. They won the 2 most games last year. Not enough has changed where you would deviate from that opinion. Like, Candace Parker is not playing for the Aces anymore, but she was also like their 5th best player, and they've replaced her production, they think. And the Liberty are essentially just totally running it back again. And so why is it, okay, we haven't changed anything. Why is it going to be different? I think the only thing that you would say would be remarkably different with both those teams this year is the league just wasn't as deep, and I feel like there weren't as many good teams last year in terms of how they were like, some teams were just young, or they hadn't acquired the players from this draft yet. And so you could just argue, and you see it even in the win totals, where both teams, Aces and Liberty, are projected by the market to win fewer games than they won last year, even by a game or two. You might be like, well, they're running it back. Like, why are we starting there? Well, we're starting there because there might just be another game or 2 or 3 or 5. They're just a little bit more competitive, because the league's pretty good. I mean, they're just like, teams have really made some interesting moves to put themselves in that second tier, and there are a lot of teams that want to be in that second tier. There are also very few, I think, bottom feeder teams this year. I think we had like 2 or 3 last year that we were pretty confident in. We ended up gaining a couple more, Phoenix being the most notable, that did not play very well. I don't know if we're going to have a lot of young players in the league that are developing. I don't know if we're going to have that. So, I think the market's got it right.
What are some things that you bet, whether it was maybe player individual awards or some of these win totals that you were looking at?
I think all the interesting stuff in this league this year is at the bottom, and some of it's in the middle. So we can talk about Indiana as we go. I won't mention them here. So their win total is basically 20.5 everywhere. Just a reminder, they play a 40-game season. Kind of view it as hey, do you think Caitlin Clark's going to go over 500 in her first year with the Fever? They have Aaliyah Boston, who won Rookie of the Year last year. She was the #1 pick last year. So this combination could potentially be really interesting. Just, is it going to be really interesting right now? Or is it really interesting like when the Aces break up in 3 years, and then these guys are in their prime, these players are in their prime, and they go on to win a title or do something really interesting? Is it right now? And I'll just remind people the way the win allocations work, like how stuff's going to get distributed. The Aces and Liberty are so good, or they were so good last year, so I'm thinking they'll be really good this year, that there were only 4 teams last year out of 12 that finished over 500. So if you're like, well, she could go over 500, be like, well, nobody goes over 500, because the Aces and the Liberty win all 80. Like, they just win every game. So like, if you never beat them, that decreases the chances that you're going to win 21. It's really tough to win 20. Not everybody gets to do that. And if Connecticut's ever pretty good, and now Seattle seems pretty stable as like a 23, 25 win team, there just aren't a lot of wins. Like, if I had to bet the Fever win total, I'd bet under, just because it's hard. It's going to be really tough this year to go over 500. There's 2 super teams. There might be a third one. There's no wins left after that. There just aren't any. Like, Caitlin Clark could be great, and the Fever could be really good and go 20-20. And that would be like a great season. They can make the playoffs. They'll be like the 5 seed. Like, that'd be really good. But they're not going to go like 30-10. Like, that's just unrealistic. And it doesn't mean they can't. Just like, would you ever bet on it knowing what we know about this season and these 2 teams at the top? Never. So I don't think the Fever are that it. Like, they're very interesting because of the players, but betting so far, I don't think they're very interesting. If I had to bet, I bet the under. I think at the bottom is where like you will get disagreement. So there are 3 teams that are supposed to be brutal this year that have win totals as low as you can get. Just for people to know, like, the worst team you would project something like 8-32, 9-31, 10-30, like that range. So when we talk about like what's up, in the NBA, that's a different kind of thing, right? It's like, oh, well, 20 wins in the NBA, or in the NFL, 2-15, 3-14. So in the WNBA, I'd say like your worst team is probably going to go something like 9-31 or 10-30. There are three teams that seem to be headed in that direction according to the betting market. Chicago, who has Angel Reese on their team. That's people. Teresa Witherspoon's their head coach. I don't think she's ever coached before, but it's kind of like cool, a former player coming back to coach. Los Angeles, who lost by far their best player, Nneka Ogwumike, now plays for Seattle. She's part of that super team that they assembled, and they didn't replace her with a star player. They drafted two players instead, two rookies that'll be really exciting this year. So Los Angeles, figure big step back. Chicago, figure big step back. And then a team I think that has a chance to be, and like to use like super negative language, like I think has a chance to be a disaster this year, which is Washington. And so I think with these bad teams, the fact that you might have some people be like, well, maybe they'll be better than we thought. Some people like me that'll be like, well, I think one of them might be like one of the all-time worst teams. That disagreement, this is where like I feel like a lot of the betting is going to take place. So I bet Washington under 12.5, I think at -15, -20, and I bet some under 11.5 at plus for a little bit more. And I bet Los Angeles to go over. They're projected to be the worst team in the league this year. Their win total is 10.5. I bet them to go over. Chicago, I don't have a strong opinion on. They might just be exactly that bad. Reasoning here, briefly, for LA, I bet Hofer on them last year. It's a play on two things. It's a play on the coach, and it's a play on like young talent that could get better as the season goes along. So this is a team that might start rough. Like it might not be great right out of the gate. And, like as the young talent gets better and as they get good coaching, this was a team that was decimated. This is the Cleveland Browns of the WNBA last year. So many games missed due to injury. Players 2 through 6 never in the lineup at the same time. Kurt Miller's the coach. He was the coach of the Sun. He's a 2-time WNBA Coach of the Year winner. This is his second year with the team. Like I want to play on coaches like that in any sport, especially when they are expected to do absolutely nothing. The market thinks this team's losing basically 75% of the games that they play. The bar is as low as it can be, and I get the guy who always does more with less. I get that guy in this situation. Like that seems like such a great opportunity. And again, like 11 and 29, I'm cashing all the tickets. Like I don't need anything good here. I just need slightly less awful than the market thinks. And I got a big time overachiever as the coach who has a great track record.
I want to start with the Cowboys-Browns though, because we kind of played the game of what we thought the spread would be, and then as we were wrapping up the show, we kind of got some official numbers. And Ken, you were right on the money. You said Dallas -1, -1.5. Here we are today, BetMGM, and that is the line against the Cleveland Browns. So kind of your just initial thoughts on this line, and do you kind of see it moving, towards maybe a -3? Can you see it moving back towards Cleveland being the favorites potentially? What are your thoughts on this match?
Yeah, I mean, just like with the Chiefs game, with the opener, right? You try to ask yourself, like, all right, is there something unique to, that they're going to play on September 8th instead of any other day on the calendar? Is there something unique to, like, what's going to happen there? And in the Chiefs game, there are a couple things that are interesting, right? Their opener against Baltimore, which we talked about yesterday. Like, all right, it'll be the Ravens' first, like, real game action with a new defensive coordinator. And they draw the Mahomes offense. Like that's a tough draw right out of the gate, right? Obviously. And then, on the other side, is Rashee Rice going to play in the game? And if he doesn't, does that impact whether you want to bet something or what you think happens in the game? This one's like a little tougher, I guess, because it's like, oh, well, like, are any of those things? And like, no, not really. And the other thing is, my guess will be these are two teams where you probably didn't see the starting quarterback at all in the preseason, or like very little. I'll be curious what the Browns do with Deshaun Watson, like coming off an injury. Do you try to get him reps a lot? Like how do you treat preseason games with a quarterback who's like got a lot of experience, just hasn't played that many games recently? And what do you do with a player like that? Will we have seen him play a lot? Will there still be a lot of mystery about his status and rehab and like how he's going to look coming into the game? And for Dallas, like I don't think we'll have any of those questions about Dak. He probably just won't play very much, and we won't really know a lot there. My theory on Cleveland is going to be like I think Cleveland has the potential to be really good this year. We've done this on the show a number of times. There's sort of an interesting mix of like a coach that I really, really like, a quarterback with some upside still, maybe not as much as some of the other quarterbacks in the league now, as he gets older, but like there's definitely still some Deshaun Watson upside, and just a team that was ravaged by injuries last year. And well, actually, it's funny when we do WNBA later, I have some pretty strong opinions on a couple teams. I actually think there's like the the Cleveland Browns of the WNBA is actually maybe a comparison that I'll make later. A team that I think last year suffered from a lot of the same problems that the Browns did, and why, even though the Browns won a lot of games, like it could have been better, and the team could have been better, and this year could be better if they just had better health. So to me, this game would almost be like not a referendum like that has to be it and none of the other games matter, but kind of a referendum on like, can the Browns show some of that upside in this game? You know, they're a home dog to one of the top 5 or 6 rated teams in the league. You can order them however you like to start the year. Where do you have San Francisco? Where do you have Baltimore? Where do you have Kansas City? Dallas is probably like right after some first tier of teams, and Browns are a home dog to them. It'll be kind of, can they show some of that upside? So many players back from injury, Watson back from an injury. How does it look? And then the second thought is just like, am I a total sicko if I'm already just really excited to tease the Browns to plus 7.5 in this game against Dallas in a road game, having to win by margin right out of the gate? Seems like a tough ask against this kind of a team, especially against this defense, especially. So yeah, just kind of 2 things that stood out to me in that game.
And you don't even need to tease them. You can just take them outright. They're going to win this game. I love the Browns.
Well, I would still like to tease them.
I love them.
And as much as you say that, yes, I would actually still like to tease them.
I mean, you certainly could. You get them over the key number of 7 for sure. But I love the Browns. I'm already picturing in this game, Ken, and Dak Prescott outside against that defense. I can't wait to bet Browns defense anytime touchdown. It just feels like one of those games where Myles Garrett just wrecks havoc. Like he's all over the field. And look, I mean, it's a real thing.
Line too. Couple new starters on the Cowboys offensive line against that Browns defensive front. That'll be an interesting matchup in that game, obviously, as well.
Yep, great call. And like, it's a real thing. You know, we see it. It was huge. Like, it was a huge thing with the Saints in those Breeze and Peyton years, like when they would play on turf and then they would go on natural grass. And like the last couple of years, that's been a real thing for Dallas. Now, certainly playing at Cleveland in September, as opposed to like late November or December, that's a huge advantage for the Cowboys. It should be much nicer weather. But you mentioned it. The Browns defense was great last year, but the home and road splits were insane. The Browns had the best defense points per game wise at home and the worst points per game on the road. They couldn't stop anybody on the road, but they were terrific at home. So I don't really see that changing much this season. I think they're going to be another great defense, especially at home. I think it's going to be a tough matchup for Dallas in week 1. And I like the Browns. And they're obviously getting a lot of guys back from injury. Watson's coming back. Chubb's coming back. 26% of their payroll last year, Ken, was on the IR. So they dealt with a ton of injuries. They'll be getting a ton of guys back, and I like them in that game against the Cowboys.